Welcome to the Informed Pregnancy and Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, pregnancy-focused chiropractor, Dr. Elliot Berlin. My guest today is an actor, a comedian, a mommy, a juggler, because she has now 3 children. Wow. And boys, not just 3 children, 3 boys. Her original, the before episode to this after episode was Informed Pregnancy Plus on a brand new series called Empowered Mama. And she shares over there the experience of having her first 2 children, both by cesarean birth. And she was very pregnant and planning for a vaginal birth after cesarean. We also did a stand-up comedy show together when she was 39 weeks and 5 days. And I still had the bigger belly. Selah Victor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And also congratulations on having your 3rd boy.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Someone told me recently, they're like, 3 boys, you might as well have 5 kids. Same thing.
It's a ton of energy.
Exactly.
All right. So what happened was I was watching this brand new program online called Empowered Mama, and I happened to notice that you shared your experience having your first 2 boys by cesarean birth. My little recap would be the first one was ginormous. How big? Like 11 pounds?
Basically 10, 15. Yeah.
Okay. And then for the second one, you're planning a vaginal birth after cesarean, but then at your doctor's visit, the fluid was low. And they're just like, come on in. We'll just have another C-section. And
that night, she was like, we have to get this baby out tonight. Because the fluid was so low. Well, and what was crazy was I planned on a VBAC, but I hadn't done anything to plan. It was the pandemic. I really didn't know what I didn't know. I just assumed I would have a VBAC, and now I know a lot more. So that, looking back, was a huge mistake, and I remedied it this one. Third one, as we'll get into.
And just for a little more context, something that was interesting is that your first 2 both ended up in the NICU.
Yes. Yeah. So that was one of the motivating factors to try something different, because even though obviously not every C-section baby ends up in the NICU, I just thought it was really interesting. And also the fact that there is a correlation between lung development and not going through the vaginal canal, because going through the vaginal canal, their lungs get that practice where they, go back and forth until they're out.
And they also just get all the fluid squeezed out of them.
Exactly. Yes. Like that's exactly
rollers.
Right. Yeah. Like sponges or whatever. Yeah. And in both of them, my first 2, they did not have all the fluid out. So they ended up in the NICU for 5 days. And as any NICU mom will tell you, it's just kind of miserable to be in the NICU, and it's not fun, at least the way that the hospital I was at did it. So I just was very motivated not to have that same experience.
Yeah, I can't imagine even under the best circumstances that NICU would be fun.
Right. Yeah.
And I only recently, by doing a couple of episodes with NICU moms, really started to get a deeper understanding of, like, you're so freshly postpartum, like you just gave birth, and all the learning curves and all the recoveries that are happening at the same time, and all the shifts that are happening on a mind, body, and spirit level, to just add on top of that the stress of NICU and not going home with your baby.
And not having the baby in your room, if you're in the hospital, what I mean?
Recovering for several day recovery from the surgery. So it's still going to get bigger in my mind over time, but I got an extra sort of perception of the depth of what that must be like. And I could see why you would want to avoid it, because you also said in Empowered Mama that you had a good recovery, like a better recovery than you thought from your first, at least.
Yes. It wasn't terrible, the first one, because I didn't have another kid to watch or lift or anything, So I was like, oh yeah, this isn't so bad. Second one was a little worse for sure, but it still wasn't terrible. I have learned since, and even as we get through this birth story, I have very high tolerance for pain.
Oh, I know that for sure. Yeah, on many levels. Before we jump into this 3rd birth, I want to just have an idea, because I don't even know, what was your plan for your first birth-wise?
My plan for my first, it's so funny looking back, because I remember the day my doctor said, how heavy would you want to try to push out? And I looked at her without even hesitating. I literally said 12 pounds.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I didn't know. I was totally ignorant and stupid in a way, but she looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, what? Like, what's a couple more extra? Because I knew 10 was big in my head. So I thought, what's two more extra? So
Yeah,
dumb.
well, I've never seen
But
12, and I've been to a lot of births. I've had, involvement in thousands of now birth journeys, and I don't think I've ever had a patient have a 12-pound baby.
I mean, it's
But
crazy.
11,
Supposedly, my great grandmother had one, but I don't
wow.
know if that was true. If it's like old folklore over the years getting passed down. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do think I was in my head. Well, and even with my water broke. And even then, I never felt contractions. They rushed me like straight to a C-section because there was meconium in the water.
Oh,
Yeah. So I never got to feel labor or anything. But even after my water broke, I was like, I can do this. And I knew he was very big from going to an MFM and all that. Dr. Rad, actually. Yeah.
yeah. I
So,
usually don't put a lot of stock in the prenatal weighings that they do since there's no fetal scale, but he's surprisingly accurate time and time again. I
yeah,
don't know.
he almost got it to the ounce. Yeah. He was
He's
very
very
accurate.
detailed. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if he has a
Yeah.
super machine or just a great sense of it, but he's usually right. So you knew you're
Yeah.
having a fairly big baby, and then your water broke and there was meconium and they pulled you into a cesarean birth. But did you have sort of your mindset on one type of birth or another?
I did. I was one of those who was just gung ho, natural, no drugs, vaginal. My mom had 8 babies without any drugs, all natural. So I'm like, I could do this. I've been a personal trainer in my 20s and early 30s before kids, and I've been, a workout addict my whole life. So I'm like, I can do this. I'm strong, and it was sort of the days before finding out. Basically, I scheduled the C-section ironically for the day after my water broke. So I knew I was going to have a C-section because he was so big and I had come to terms with it and peace with it. But when my water broke, I did get a little excited, like maybe this is going to happen,
Ooh, yeah. And
Yeah.
then, oh,
Yeah. It was
uh,
hard. It's like emotional roller coaster. I think the difference with him, Ezra, my first, and the reason I still feel peace about that first one is when he was pulled out of me, he was ginormous. Like I was like, I've never seen such a big newborn because he was just so chunky too.
that was my favorite though.
I know. And his
Mm.
head was huge. Like I just was like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I could
Dodged a
have done
bullet?
that. Yeah, maybe I dodged a bullet. So that was like the piece I felt. And then the second part of it was that I got to be with him the first 12 hours of his life until they realized he needed to go to the NICU.
Mhm.
So that was a huge difference between the first and the second. So I think the second, I don't know if you want me to go into that part of it, but
Well, oh,
I
what
know.
with the second? What happened there?
Well, it was just a very, I don't want to use the word traumatic flippantly, but in the C-section, there was a very emergent situation with the doctor raising her voice. A lot of people rushed in and everything. We didn't know what was happening. And it turns out, obviously, everything was fine, but he was rushed straight to the NICU for breathing. And I wasn't with him. I was in recovery alone. It was just, not ideal.
I mean, it sounds like there was a moment of near panic. Was that something she saw with the baby once you were open, or?
Yeah, basically, she said his head had moved and she didn't want to cut through the placenta to get to him. So she cut a bigger incision, but she needed, extra tools, which that's what she was yelling for.
Oh,
So it felt like something was very wrong. And, hearing my husband's voice, everybody's voice around me, I just thought one of us is not going to make it out alive. Like it was really scary until I later found out what happened. But
yeah, that happens sometimes with my contractor. He says, once you cut into a wall, you don't know what you're going to find.
and it's true, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Funny,
proud of
but
myself because usually my analogies are food based.
yeah, that was a good one, actually. Very good. Spot on. I like
Uh,
it.
all right. So you had to, with a smile, not how you wanted, but exactly not your primary plan. But then for this third one, you really wanted to have a vaginal birth after cesarean. And you said you did more planning for it and a little more research. Let's take a little break and we come back. We'll find out how you got ready for it and then how things went down. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking to Selah Victor. All right, so 2 babies down. Third one comes, and I mean, you have great reasons for wanting to have a vaginal birth after cesarean, but I know in large parts of the country, it's very hard to find a doctor who will even support one vaginal birth after one cesarean. You're now at the point where you have vaginal birth you're trying for after 2 cesarean. Is that difficult even in sunny Los Angeles, California? Like, is there a large pool of providers?
No, there is not. It was very difficult. And actually, I should back up. When I was recovering from my second son's birth in the hospital room, I said to my husband, I will not get pregnant again, because I didn't think, that I would have to have another C-section. It was worse. The recovery for that one was worse. And of course, the NICU, blah, blah, blah. So I just was like, I'm not doing this again. We're done. We're done having kids. So my third was a complete surprise.
Oh,
Unplanned.
hi.
Yeah, that was a oopsie. And so I found myself in a situation where
Is it TMI to ask how you had oopsied?
well, okay. So basically, I was breastfeeding, and then the cycle after I stopped breastfeeding is when we got pregnant. So there was that, but then there was also the fact that we did IVF with my first. My second was natural, so I should have known. But but I'm like, I'm 41.
What are the odds?
What are the odds? Yeah.
I guess we
And
know.
yeah. Oh yeah. Apparently I'm fertile myrtle now. So my husband's
Wow.
like,
Okay.
yeah.
Wait, so you didn't have a period after you breastfed before this pregnancy?
I
Or you had
did,
one?
Dr.
You had
Berlin.
one. You
No,
had one.
I had many. I think I had about a year's worth. I should
Oh.
have known. Oh, here's the crazy thing though. I did track my ovulation cycle, every month just in case to make sure we weren't, and I was not supposed to be ovulating that day. So something was ordained from above,
Oh.
because it was very odd. And that actually that little tidbit has to do with later. I can tell you more about this, but the first OB I had changed my due date basically because he thought the baby was measuring bigger.
Hmm.
And the final OB I landed with, he said, no, it's based on your cycle. We're sticking to this due date.
Oh,
So
there's an OB switch. This is getting exciting.
oh, yes. It's very, very suspenseful. I know.
Okay,
Yes.
so not a large pool, yet you have 2 so far that
Yeah,
you've
that's
worked with.
true.
Yeah, tell
So
me what that process was like, finding support.
basically, well, and this was what was crazy. When I first found out I was pregnant with this surprise miracle baby, I called my old OB who did the first 2 C-sections because I thought, well, I don't know, that's just what you do, right? And when her office told me she was not delivering anymore, and I got chills, like I literally got chills thinking, oh, maybe I don't have to have another C-section, because I knew she would have me do another C-section. So I just thought maybe there's another way. Maybe I could explore actually getting a vaginal birth. And I knew from hearing one of my really good friends who had just had a VBAC, and also
After
listening after one, yes, sure, hers was after one, but hearing her story and listening to vaginal birth stories on your podcast and on other podcasts, every time I would listen to one, I would cry. Like I would literally cry, and just, I don't know, I just knew deep down that this is what I truly, truly wanted. And my friend Laura led me into different, like, first of all, she said, you have to go to Dr. Berlin every week. Like, I think I was really early at that point. I'm like, can I schedule every week? You're like, you don't really need to come in every week.
Happy
But
to see you, but
yes, yeah, we could spread it out a little at first. But yeah, so I was listening to her advice and started listening to your podcast, to the VBAC link, to everything that was like VBAC related, coming in to see you, interviewing doctors. I mean, I just went gung ho, full force into this and doing research. Statistics really comfort me. Maybe that's illogical, but just knowing what the facts and the evidence are, and finding out that actually after one C-section, it's usually 1% chance of rupture, which, by the way, if you didn't know, that's the biggest risk, uterine rupture for VBAC.
right.
And once you increase the C-sections, it goes a little bit higher. But for me, I'd never felt like it was a huge risk personally. But anyway, I digress. So I started interviewing doctors, and the first 3 were like, absolutely not. We will not do a vaginal birth after 2 C-sections. And then a couple were what I call now VBAC tolerant, but not VBAC supportive.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah, they were, like, you can do it if this.
Right.
And
Has to be on
the
the third day of a lunar month, and Mercury has to be a little
right.
bit in retrograde. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So then I landed on two doctors that were, I should say, one was seemingly supportive. He ended up being VBAC tolerant category, and the other was totally supportive. And I actually went with the first, the one that seemed supportive but later was tolerant. And what I mean by that is in our first appointment, and I really liked this doctor. He seems like a great doctor, but he did have a list of protocols and demands, so to speak, that I had to meet. And one of those was meeting with his MFM, only his, by the way, no other second opinion, nothing. So I went to these specialist appointments with the MFM. And at the 20-week scan, he found that my uterine wall had 1 centimeter that was less than 3 millimeters thick, according to his ultrasound. And he said he was not comfortable with that and to come back at 30 weeks and we'll reevaluate. But if it was worse, he would not recommend a VBAC. And whatever this MFM recommended is what that OB would do. No ifs, ands, and buts.
I see.
So,
Well, okay. So for anyone listening that might not know, you did mention the primary risk of doing a vaginal birth after having had a cesarean birth is that there is a scar in the uterus from cutting it open to take the baby out. And it heals, but it's not as it was. And that scarring can be thin and may separate, may pull apart and open up during birth, during the intensity of labor. So I don't even know that,
right.
because you said you're a data person. I know that they measure, sometimes some doctors measure, some don't. But do we have good data on?
So, no, we do not. That is a good question. Yeah, because most women don't even get these tests done. Most VBAC patients don't go and get their uterine wall measured for thickness. So first of all, there's a lack of data there. And then secondly, the way they measure it, learned, is not extremely accurate and it doesn't necessarily correlate to uterine rupture. And many doctors, including another specialist I saw who's been on your podcast and my OB that I ended up with, do not think that there is any correlation actually to the data that exists.
Oh, I got you.
So,
is that Dr. Shabir?
Yeah. So
okay.
Dr. Shabir, yeah. I went for a second opinion.
Right. Well, he's a pure data guy when he gives you, unless you ask for opinion, he's just giving you the facts. Right. So I wondered, that would be my go-to person anyway, to be like, hey, Dr. Shabir, is there accuracy here? Okay. So basically from 20 weeks on, then you're sort of at the mercy of that maternal fetal medical specialist.
Exactly. And never mind the fact that this OB said I had to labor and deliver within 24 hours. I couldn't go past 40 weeks. All of these things at my first appointment, I didn't know were pretty strict protocols that a lot of women would not ever meet, So as it turns out, I did not meet when you hear what happened.
Are those their protocols in general for a VBAC or more specifically for a VBAC after 2?
I think it was more for the VBAC after 2, but that's a good question. I don't know for sure with him what his lines would be with a 1 cesarean.
At what point did you switch?
So after that 30 week, I probably should have switched before that because I knew at the 30 week he was going to say it's even thinner. I mean, the uterine wall gets thinner as you get more pregnant. So I knew that was going to be the case, but I just stayed with him. I don't know. I really liked him personality wise, and I wasn't crazy about the OB I ended up with. And you and my doula, Joanna, both said, listen, you really need to give this other OB. Do you want me to name names? I don't know.
It's totally fine. He's been on the podcast too before.
I thought so. Okay. Dr. Brock. When I first met him, for whatever reason, I just didn't gel with him. And I just thought, no, he's not for me. He's not for me. And then you were so great about encouraging me to go meet with him again. Joanna felt the same way because both of you said he is so successful with what you want to do. Like he's the Michael Jordan of VBACs, you know?
Yeah, they call him a VBAC king, and I almost seem like a specialist. Like even if you love your OB, but VBAC is extremely important to you. And like you said, your doctor might be VBAC tolerant, and maybe you're not sure. You know, it's almost like going to a specialist. Like if you go to a general doctor, but then something comes up
Yeah,
and it's more heart related, then you go see a cardiologist as a specialist. He's a VBACologist in my book.
that is such a good way to say it.
Mhm.
And when I went back to see him to re-interview him, I guess, I don't know, I saw him in a completely different light. And I'm like, I don't have to be best friends with him. Like, I just want someone who knows what they're doing and is very knowledgeable. And for whatever reason, I actually ended up feeling like he was like a friend because
Oh,
I got him. I got what he did. I got him. And I felt completely safe with him, completely relaxed with him.
that's
His
so
demeanor,
important.
it's so important. And he put all the fear out of my mind. He was just amazing, like in every sense of the word. And really came through for me at those last 10 weeks in the birth, which I'll get into. But
Did he have his own set of guidelines, restrictions?
so a little bit. He didn't have deadlines with like your due date, your whatever, which was great. He reminded me more of a midwife in a lot of ways. So basically, he did like the vaginal ultrasound, one or two in the beginning, and then would do the abdominal ultrasound to check the health of the baby. In fact, there was a couple times where he said, because I would get worried, and I'd say, "Do you think he's really big?" And he said, "Well, what do you think?" It's usually the mother's instinct after
Oh,
the
wow.
first baby. Yeah. So I felt very safe and very confident. So then my due date situation came, and that was when that last MFM with my last OB had put it at a week before because he said the baby was measuring a week before. And thank God Dr. Brock based it off my cycle because what ended up happening was at my 40-week appointment, I should say, what I thought was my 40-week appointment, he said, "No, you're not due for another week." And I'm like, oh, thank God, because
Oh,
there were no signs of anything, you know,
right.
so I
And it
hadn't
also,
dilated.
most importantly, afforded us
Yeah.
the opportunity to do one more stand-up comedy show about having
I mean,
kids.
come on. Yeah, that was a perfect opportunity. I was a hit with that big belly.
Oh
I
my
could do no
goodness.
wrong.
The
I
crowd did
know.
go nuts just from the moment you walked out.
Literally, they're like, "What is she doing here?" It was awesome.
Oh, so thank
I
you,
could
Dr. Brock, for bringing
hardly,
us a little more
yeah,
time.
thank you. Yes. And of course, bringing me more time for labor
Oh,
because a
that
lot of
too.
doctors, right, that too, that small detail.
But he's also
Because,
not,
yeah,
I mean, whatever the due date is, whatever 40 weeks actually is, it's not a cutoff point for him.
no, it's not. I think he would have let me go even to 42, you know, like his whole thing. Oh, when you asked about what were his standards or protocols, he wanted the baby to be in a good position. He wanted me to be monitored the entire labor. And he wanted me to put a catheter in for an epidural just in case I needed to be rushed to C-section. I mean, then I wouldn't have to go under general anesthesia. And those were his three things.
The catheter
I
meaning, right? So you're not having to put any drugs in there if you don't want to.
exactly because he knew I wanted a drug-free birth. He was like, "We just need this just in case you were to go to the C-section," which I actually really didn't want that, and I didn't want the monitoring. So I gave in to those two things because he was so awesome and supportive. But I, in the end, was right about those two things, and I'll tell you why more.
Oh, this is a perfect
But
time to take a little break. And then when we come back, find out about how this birth happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are talking to Selah Victor, and the time is now. You waited a very long time for this birth, and now we've waited a long time. How did things get started?
yeah, so basically, we went out to dinner.
So you're out to dinner.
So we're out to dinner. And this is just a side note. I was all dolled up for dinner. So
Oh,
that night, yes. And I had like a, you know, makeup, hair done, whatever. So that night when I lost what I think now was my mucus plug, it was very little amount of like sticky discharge and a little bloody show. But when that happened, it was like about 10 p.m. I thought, oh, I bet I'm going to go into labor. I'm keeping my hair and makeup on. So a lot of people commented that on that in my pictures. I'm like, yep, I was all dolled up.
Oh, that's just how I
Yeah.
always
So I
look.
went, yeah, I woke up like this. But yeah, so that happened. And I got so excited because at this point, I'm 40 weeks and 4 days. And everyone thought my due date was the week before. So to everyone else, I'm 41 weeks and 4 days. So it's like, when is this happening? And I wasn't actually anxious because Dr. Brock was so reassuring. And also because I started a renovation of my home at 30 weeks. So I had a lot to do.
Oh, yes.
So
You were juggling so many
I was
things.
very busy. So many things. So I was not anxious about when it would start, but when it did, I was of course excited. Also because I had never experienced labor. So this was exciting. Immediately text my mom, get ready to come watch the two older boys. You know, this is happening. And I texted my doula, Joanna, and she's like, okay, just go to bed. It could happen any minute or it could be days still. So just get some rest. I'm like, okay. So I go to bed, 2 a.m. I wake up and the pad I was wearing was soaked. My pants were wet. I thought, I think my water broke, but it wasn't so much water where with my first son, there was like a gush. So I wasn't totally sure. And neither was Joanna. She thought maybe it was still a little mucus plug. So we didn't count that, so to speak, as my water breaking, partly on purpose because we wanted to keep the clock stopped, you know, with labor. But sure enough, around 2 a.m., my contraction started.
Oh, wow.
And yes, it was so exciting.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. I'm like the only person on this planet that would be excited.
So thrilled.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. But they weren't very intense. They felt like period cramps, like it wasn't that bad. And they were every 8 to 10 minutes or so. So they were pretty far apart. Joanna said, just go to sleep, try to rest. But I could not. I was
Just because
so
of the sheer
excited.
excitement? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Not because of the intensity.
No, I was just like, this is happening. Like, this is amazing. I can't believe it. And then they started getting closer and closer. And it was like every 4 minutes, 1 minute long, 411, whatever that is, right? And it was an hour of that. And they were definitely getting more intense. Not at all what they were in the end, which I now know, which is hilarious because I look back, I'm like, oh, that was nothing. Like, I should have stayed home longer, actually. But that was towards like 4 a.m. And Joanna said, jump in the shower, try to just relax, try to rest more if you can. And then they kept coming close. They were about 2 to 3 minutes apart at that point.
Oh,
And I
wow. They
started getting,
moved in quick.
oh, yeah, I started getting a little worried because I thought maybe I do have a high pain tolerance. Maybe I'm just not feeling them really hard. And this is going to happen. I've had several friends have accidental home births. Like, this is crazy. This is kind of getting worrisome now. So Joanna came around 5 and we tried to labor at home till about 10-ish. And then it just got where with 2 other kids, I couldn't concentrate. It was nerve wracking, you know, thinking what's happening. So I tried to eat a little bit. I couldn't really do that. So we just left for the hospital around 11. Oh, we called Dr. Brock and he was like, come in, your water broke, you know, explained what happened. We didn't know if it broke, but he thought it did. So he said, come into the hospital. And oh, that was another one of his protocols actually for VBAC. He did not want me to labor at home super, super long because of the risk of rupture.
Yeah,
So in a
which is
way, it
pretty
was,
atypical for him, even with the VBAC. I think it's because of the VBAC after too.
yes, I think you're right. I think that was it. And I was okay with that. I mean, looking back, I wish I would have stayed home a little longer because when I got there, they checked me and I was at a 1.
Oh, okay.
I know. And it was really demoralizing.
Oh, I'm
Like,
sorry. Oh,
yeah. Like at that point, it had been 10 hours, 11 hours. I'm like, really? A
but
1?
still
Like,
early, you know, still
I
early
know.
in your
Well,
time there.
I know that now, but at the time I was like, oh, I thought it was so intense. Like I thought I was, you know, I would have been at
Mm.
least a 3 or something. Actually, Joanna said at that point, because I should mention she is a licensed midwife as well. And she has been to, I don't know, something like 2,500 births. And she said what she has noticed a lot of times is the resident doctors or nurses will oftentimes underestimate how far along you are because And it's also very subjective too, depending on how you check someone, right? So it could be subjective, but it also could be not deliberately underestimating, but going for the lower number of what you find because they don't want the doctor to come and be like, oh, I thought she was further along. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
don't know.
For them, a lot of times it's a timing game.
Yes.
The doctor doesn't want to be there too early and they don't want to stay too late. It depends on the system you're in, but with the private care where your specific doctor comes in to catch your baby and then wants to get out of there as soon as
Yeah,
possible, the timing's tricky if they have to, if they come in and they have to wait a few hours and really mess up their day.
exactly.
So,
So that's why they tend to a little bit underestimate or go with the lower number. So Joanna was like, I think you're actually a little bit further along. And that was really helpful to have her as a doula and have that support there in general. She really, really helped. She stayed, well, I can get into that later, but she was really, really helpful. I highly recommend getting a doula, especially if you're trying for a VBAC. Like that is a must have. Yeah, so we just kept laboring. Joanna would have me do different positions, try to get whatever position was making the contractions come harder. And then I should say there was a few interesting things that happened in that early labor. First of all, I had a very specific prayer list. So
hmm.
I had like very specific things I was praying about that I wanted to go right in the birth. And interestingly enough, every single one happened except for
Oh,
one, which I'll
okay.
get to later.
What kind
Yes.
of things?
And okay, so one of the things was I wanted to go into labor naturally without induction, Pitocin or whatever, which most OBs won't even let a VBAC have Pitocin. But my doctor was open to it, which turned out to be a good thing. So this is why I went into this is what happened about 24 hours in, where my contractions started to really get far apart, like 7 to 10 minutes,
Oh,
which was crazy, right? Like just really slow down. And at that point, I think I was a 6. And so Dr. Brock was like, we got to start Pitocin. We got to get these contractions harder. It's been 24 hours.
as
So
like an augmentation.
yeah. And at first I was like, well, I didn't want this, but then it turns out I was grateful for it because it helped the contractions. But here's the crazy thing. It did not make them harder or more painful. Like that was the one part of the prayer is that I didn't want Pitocin because I thought it would make the contractions more painful and cause rupture. I didn't feel any difference at all. Like it was crazy. It was
Wow.
insane. I know. It did
So,
not feel different.
so it felt the same to you, but they became closer together and more productive.
They did slightly. They were still about 5 to 6 minutes apart. It was really strange. But this also was a blessing because we figured out the best position was side lying with the peanut ball in between my knees. And in between these long contraction rest periods, I would literally fall asleep, like take a cat nap
Oh, wow.
and
Unmedicated.
unmedicated. And all the nurses were like, we have never seen someone literally snore.
Ah, that's what happens when you already have 2 boys.
I was just going to say that because I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
Like,
that's it.
I need a nap. And it was sort of a blessing because I could rest in between. And so what turned out to be a 48-hour labor, actually, I know, did not feel like that. And at the same time, I had another thing that I was doing during contractions, which a lot of the nurses sort of started to comment on because they thought it was very, I guess, odd. But I was thanking God through the contractions. Like I was in a place of gratitude because it like makes me tear up now thinking about it because I was so happy to be there. Like I could not believe that I was feeling this, something I didn't think I would ever feel. And I sort of felt like that after I got pregnant naturally with my second and my third. Like I never complained during pregnancy with any of them because I couldn't get pregnant for 4 years with my first. And so it was a very similar situation where I was like, I cannot complain through this. This is so awesome that I get to feel this. And yeah, it doesn't feel great, but it didn't hurt in a way that I thought it would. It felt like hard work,
Mm.
So it was something that I was like very much in gratitude
Oh,
with. So
it's just
I
a
don't know.
different paradigm.
Yeah, when you wanted something so bad and fought for it, and nobody thought you could do it, and people were really worried about you or questioned you or whatever for so long that
Uh,
it was like, yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Oh, I wonder
Yeah.
just in general about the nurses because just because Dr. Brock has a comfort with vaginal birth after 2 cesarean, were the nurses nervous at all?
Okay. So this was on my prayer list as well, that I would get supportive nurses that, were on my team. And it was very interesting. The first nurse we got, I wouldn't say she was anti, but she was very intense. And thank God her shift ended pretty quickly because I was like, this nurse is, and she was really pushing me for that catheter to get, which I'll get to that. But I sort of was trying to push it off as long as possible because I knew I didn't want an epidural. And I
Mhm.
just felt like, I don't want that. I don't want a catheter put in me, blah, 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 in my spine. So anyway, she was really pressuring me, really pressuring me. The second nurse was less so, and she was more chill, so to speak. She was great. I mean, there was nothing to complain about. But the third nurse was like a cheerleader. And it got to a point around hour 42, something like that, where there was this one resident doctor who just kept checking me and I just kept staying the same. And it was like 12 hours. I was still at an 8 or something. And at this point, I'm sort of skipping around. I hope that's okay. I just realized
Sure.
I skipped like a huge chunk. But basically, at hour 45, it was like 5 p.m. on Monday. And I started in my little nap breaks having these involuntary urges to push. And all kinds of stuff was coming out of my body. So I just thought, oh my gosh, like I must be complete. Like I am pushing, And everyone in the room thought, she's ready, she's complete. And this resident doctor was like, nope, you're still at an 8. And everyone was frustrated, even that cheerleader nurse and the doula and me and Tony, my husband. Anyway, so after the resident doctor left, I started crying. That was the first time I really just looked at everyone. I was like, I don't know, can I do this? Like, we're at hour 45 here. This is crazy. I have no pain meds. I don't know how much longer I can do this. And that nurse was like, you are doing this. She's like, you got this. I see you in prayer and gratitude. I see you. I
Oh,
know you're going to do. I know she was like, I'm praying with you. I am thanking God with you, and you're not giving up now. And so I'm like, okay. And so she was awesome, Shamika. I loved her. And that was awesome. And actually, side story about the resident doctor. This was very interesting and I think helpful for anyone trying to do this. There's something called the intrauterine catheter. Do you know what I'm talking about?
IUPC,
Thank you, IUPC.
pressure
And
catheter,
they,
intrauterine
yes,
pressure catheter. Yeah.
yes. So they wanted to put that in, and there is like a very small chance of puncture, uterine puncture. And she just kept pushing me, pushing me, pushing me to get this thing in. And I said, no, I don't want that. Like, this is not helping me labor more. This is for your data. The monitor that they had me on kept falling. So that's why they wanted it to get better monitor of the contractions. And so I just kept refusing. And Joanna pointed out, and again, this is nothing against medical. I love my doctor, nurses, and I love the medical society, whatever. This was just interesting how they will use something that has a small chance of something really bad happening, like a uterine puncture, but they want that for their own good, right? Like it's conveniently okay for them to use that, but not other things. Does that
Well,
make sense?
yes and no. I mean, ultimately, everything that they're wanting to do is for your good, but it's a measure that makes them more comfortable. Whereas
Yes.
I think maybe what I'm hearing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe what I'm hearing you say is that there's certain obstetric risks that they're willing to take and other obstetric risks that may be very parallel and similar in terms of the amount of risk that they're not willing to take or not comfortable taking. And it seems somewhat arbitrary.
That's right. Much
Um,
better articulated than I did.
well, no, but I mean, I don't have the emotional piece. Like when you want something and you're the one who's going to be going through it and you're the one who's going to have the risk and or the benefit, it seems like you would be the most important voice, especially if you're coming from a place of having done some research.
Right.
Uh,
And at that point, I didn't want one more wire in me that I
yeah.
had because they had the monitor. I was on wireless monitoring, but it wasn't picking up the signal. So then I was on wired monitoring, which was not ideal because you can't really walk far. and it's in the way, and they kept having to change the position of it. So it's very distracting.
I would also say you're way outside of the comfort zone of
I
most
know.
hospital birth workers
It's true.
on so many different levels. It's not just a vaginal birth, but it's a vaginal birth after 2 cesarean. You're after 40 weeks. You're unmedicated. Labor has been going on more than 24 hours.
I know.
So in many
True.
levels,
This is all true.
they're outside their comfort zone.
You're so right. Yeah, like Dr. Brock is, a cowboy in that regard. Like, he doesn't worry, but you're absolutely right. The rest of the medical staff was, they wanted to make sure. And I get it. And that's why, of course, I consented to the monitoring. I want to make sure the baby's okay. Absolutely. Like, that was fine. I wished it could have been wireless, but that was why, all that to say, that was why I did not want the IU PC. I just did not want one more thing connected. The other reason I did not want that is going back to the catheter. For whatever reason, I ended up consenting to the catheter because Dr. Brock was like, listen, it's Murphy's Law. If you don't put it on, you're going to need it. If you do, you're not going to need it. Just wear your seatbelt.
Persuasive argument. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I thought, you know what? I am trusting everything he's saying. He is awesome. He has not failed me. He's giving me, like you said, so much time, so much leeway. I'm just going to trust him. So they placed the catheter. And for whatever reason, Dr. Berlin, I don't know, it must have pinched a nerve, something.
Oh, no.
Yes, it was the only pain I felt. I mean, true pain, like excruciating. I threw up 3 times.
Oh, wow.
It was insane. Yeah. So that was a bummer because obviously I was trying not to get it, but I knew it was important to him. And I just was like, this hurts so bad. I think it was also where Ari was at the time, where he had dropped, because later in the labor, the pain just went away all of a sudden. So I don't know. It was really strange.
You self-medicated. Yeah. You make your own cocktail of very powerful drugs.
Yes.
That have a way to help you. So how did you get past 8 centimeters?
So then after that resident went out, after the tears and Shamika cheerleading me, Joanna said, I really actually think you're complete. I think this is an example of them underestimating. You are pushing involuntarily. Dr. Brock said he's going to come check you in 3 hours. Let's just keep doing what we're doing and laboring, So I said, okay. Sure enough, Dr. Brock comes 3 hours later and he says, you're complete.
Ah.
I know. Like, thank God. Oh, by the way, I was 100% effaced pretty much almost the entire time. I was like, started at 90 or something. So that was good.
Yeah. And baby was moving down.
Yeah. So there was progress and that was encouraging. So then he says, you're ready to push. And Joanna had warned me ahead of time. She's like, pushing on your back gets a really bad rap. But she said, in my experience, I found that is the best position to push. So she said, he's going to put you on your back. And I agree with it. Like, I support it. So he did. And Joanna was on one side. Tony was on the other. They're each pushing a knee into my chest. And Dr. Brock put these like bars next to me to pull,
Mm-hmm.
And I asked for a mirror so I could see my progress and like get motivated, I guess. And Dr. Brock was like the best coach. Like, you've seen him, right?
I've been to births as a doula with him.
Oh my gosh. I had been to a birth with him from my friend Jen.
Oh, right.
Right. But I didn't remember this. He was like, pull your arms back, push your leg. Like, he was like a track coach. And I respond to that because I was an athlete,
Yeah.
So I'm like,
What a match on a level I wasn't anticipating.
It was awesome. The nurses were like, whoa, she's really pushing. And everyone was like, I've never seen someone push that well. But then this baby was so big. It was like 3 hours later. And Dr. Brock was like, Selah, you have 1 inch to go. You're so close. But it's been 3 hours and you've labored for, 46, 47, whatever. And he goes, we have to use the vacuum. We got to get this baby out. Everything's fine. His heart rate stayed great. Everything was great. But he's like, you're gonna wear out. We got to use the vacuum. And I'm like, whatever, just get it out. I don't care. And again, this is why Dr. Brock is awesome, because I have heard, I don't know how true this is, I've heard a lot of OBs will not use a vacuum now because of the 1% risk of cranial damage. But he was willing to do whatever it took to get him out. I've heard that some OBs would have rushed me to a C-section at that point. Obviously would have been devastating.
Yeah, 48. What a bummer.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? So he says, but listen, the vacuum is very intense. You're going to need a little, what he called push epidural in your catheter, in the catheter. And so again, at that point, there was no fight left in me. I'm like, whatever, put it in. And Joanna looks at me like, are you sure? You said you didn't want it. I'm like, I don't care. I don't need to be a hero. So just get this baby out. So this is what's crazy. So again, like on my prayer list, there was like no pain meds, right? So in comes the anesthesiologist and she's about to put the syringe in and she goes, there's a small crack on the cap of the catheter. And Dr. Brock's like, what? She's like, there's a small crack. I can't put the syringe in. It goes against sanitation protocols. There could be bacteria in there. It's too late to put in a new catheter. She's pushing, she's writing, whatever. We can't do it. And he's like, put the syringe in. It's fine. I'm sure it's fine. And she's like, I won't do it. And she left.
Oh, wow.
And I know. So Joanna looks at me. She's like, you got your prayer. I know. I'm like, yes, I know. It was awesome. And so then Dr. Brock's like, okay, you're going to feel this. Like, I'm going to push on your stomach, on your uterus, and then I'm going to pull with the vacuum. Like, okay. So he does it. And again, it was an insane feeling, but it actually kind of felt like the C-section when they do that, when they push.
Oh, that pressure.
Yeah, that pressure. So I didn't feel like it hurt so bad. Okay, so they vacuum him out. And as you can see, I'll hold up, his head is perfect, like literally perfect. No cranial. I know. That was awesome. And it was just awesome. He was on me within seconds. He was latching. I was crying. My husband's crying. It was just like amazing. I could not believe that we did it. Like we did it. And I will say too, this was the prayer that wasn't answered, is that I didn't want to tear, but he was 9 pounds, 5 ounces. Ooh. I feel like God was like, yeah, good wish there.
Well, also the vacuum, generally some tearing with the vacuum.
There's a little tear, but it wasn't bad. He said it was 2nd degree. I didn't feel much pain when he was stitching me up. It just felt like pinches, whatever. But yeah, he was a huge baby, and everybody was like in the room, Dr. Brock, because one of the first things I said was, he's huge. And Dr. Brock says he looks huge because he is huge. I know.
Oh, Selah.
Yes, I know. It was crazy. And I mean, it was such a great thing with my husband too, and everything the whole time. I mean, him was so supportive. So it was just like magical bonding between us, between like our baby, everything. It was amazing.
Oh. So no NICU.
Oh, yeah. So that was the other little cherry on top. No NICU at all. He was in our room the whole time, totally perfectly healthy, perfect breastfeeding. Everything was amazing. We got to go home in 24 hours. Unreal. I had no pain.
All I could really say is, who's your chiropractor?
I know. Okay. Seriously though, that did help, because Joanna said, if I had not been going to you, literally, I am not exaggerating. I think I went probably more than anybody else.
At the end, we really we did a lot of visits, but you could feel the progression. You could feel your body getting looser, more open, more relaxed, more functional.
Yes. I need to do a commercial for you, because she literally was like, in the end, she was like, if you hadn't been going to all those because the way they were pushing my knees in was just crazy. Like, it was like my whole body was open. So I really do credit you for that.
Well, I couldn't have done it without you, is what I generally say. Selah, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
For sharing your beautiful story. I will say this, like, no matter what comes your way, you not only have seemingly a high pain tolerance physically, but also, I would say emotionally, like you wanted certain things in your births, and when they took a different turn, still always a smile from you and a gratitude for the healthy baby. And and then, on this one, just what a journey to find the support and to change horses mid-battle, so to speak.
Yeah, and, so true. Well, thank you to you too, and Joanna, for really encouraging me to not be afraid to switch and to relook at Dr. Brock, for example. That was huge. He was so incredible that if it weren't for you guys really encouraging me to go back and look at that again, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I probably would have had it if I stayed with that other OB, another C-section,
But ultimately, that mind, body, spirit strength and power to see what you want, know that you can do it, and pursue it and do it, literally against all odds.
Thank
Congratulations to you. You're
you.
also a super funny actor and comedian. I don't want to let that slide by. So as we wind down, tell us where we can find you online.
Oh, yes, at Selah Victor on all the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I'm like, what else is there? I'm not really on Twitter as much anymore. But anyway, yeah, at Selah Victor.
Selah
And
Victor.
yeah, hopefully I'll be in a show soon with you.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be amazing.
That'll be amazing.
And then also that first birth, our before episode, as we mentioned before, is on Informed Pregnancy Plus on a series called Empowered Mama. And it has like pictures and video. You really bring the whole thing to life. It's very cool.
Yay. Oh, good. That's awesome.
And then for our listeners, everything we do can be found at informedpregnancy.com.